I don't know about you, but for me, there's nothing funnier than a really good bootleg. And what could be more weird and wonderful than the world of bootleg toys? Now, there are all sorts of bootlegs out there. These are usually toys that have been made by companies that are just very carefully trying to dodge copyright on the mass retail market. These toys are usually very familiar. They are usually eerily similar to their officially licensed bigger brother. Except that, well, usually the quality isn't there, or the naming of the product is just ever so slightly different. Or maybe it's something as simple as the paint or the scale of the toy is just ever so slightly off. And it's usually at this point that the excitement level from initially recognising something on the shelf that you think you dearly want suddenly turns to a spider sense feeling of something being very wrong. And as you get closer to the item, you suddenly realise that this is indeed a cheap, terrible knockoff. And these toys will usually be found in the bargain bins of your local supermarket, or on a ratty market stall where there's a Del Boy type character trying to tell you what great value this is. And you may wonder who falls for this, and primarily I can only assume that it's adults who are taken in rather naively into believing that this is the genuine article, who've been fooled by that branding or that very similar looking packaging or whatever it might be, and have sadly been lured in by the price and the false advertising. So today, in the spirit of fun, I thought I'd count down some of my personal top 10 favourite bootlegs that I've seen across the years. In number 10, we have the half man, half machine, all cop. Yes, you know who I'm talking about. It's Robocop. And more often than not, it will be Robocop 2 or even Robocop 3 that you'll see figures of. And I do mean figures because there have been several different Robocop releases across the years. So much so, it's become something of a joke on the internet. And in fact, there is a whole fan appreciation of Robocop where fake merchandise is produced, trying to take the brand to new levels of awfulness. But there are certain releases that aren't so bad. This one, for example, from Robocop 3 with the image from Robocop 2 looks to be like a fairly decent toy. I think this could pass for a Robocop in your collection if you're a kid. I don't think it's too horrendous. It looks pretty fun. And, you know, aside from the actual title of Robocop, it's very easy to get away with this one. But one has to wonder how this really gets around copyright because the logo is the same. The image is directly taken from the film poster. And it's very, very clear that the design of the toy is literally what we see in the film and in some other toys. So this is obviously infringing copyright law, and there's no two ways about it. Simply naming the character Robocop is not enough to distinguish it from the real thing. Clearly, it wasn't in the interests of the studio to go after this company. If they were even aware of this bootleg, it certainly probably wouldn't be worth their time, money, and effort to take them to court. But this is not a legitimate excuse to get around copyright. But it does certainly provide us with a few giggles. And then there are other examples like this monstrosity. Now, as I said, there has been a bit of a craze, a bit of a trend on the internet to try and produce homemade, awful bootlegs. And if you ever stuck for something to do, I strongly recommend you go and check out some of the Robocop homemade bootlegs because they are very funny. And here's such an example. Too awful for words when we actually look at that toy. It looks like a homemade kit of something really, really diabolical. So the toy is terrible. The packaging is very funny. I do like the fact that the Robocop cartoon in the back of the packaging is saying, "I'll be back." So of course we're bringing in Terminator and Arnold Schwarzenegger into this now. And then we do have this rather strange arrow asking us to just touch him. No thanks, I'll pass. At number 9, we have a company that's decided to play a little bit safer when it comes to copyright. So, although this will be very familiar to anyone who's seen any of the Rambo films, they've opted to give him a very different name. They haven't gone with Ramboid or something silly like that. Instead, they've gone for a more generic title of Adventure Man. Doesn't quite have the same ring to it, but at least they won't be confused with Rambo or Action Man. Likewise, they've been quite careful when it comes to the packaging illustration as well, because you couldn't say with absolute certainty that this is meant to be Sylvester Stallone. Instead, it's like a strange amalgamation of Sly and Chuck Norris. And this is definitely one of those examples where the spider sense starts tingling. From a distance, you would think that this is a Rambo toy. As you get closer to it, that's when definitely the hairs on the back of your neck start to stand up and you think, what the hell am I looking at? And indeed, if you are brave enough to take a closer look at this, you'll be met with such devastating disappointment. First of all, there's no escaping it. You've got to look at the eyes. I mean, this is the worst, the worst paint apps I've ever seen on a toy, I think, anywhere. These are boggled eyes. They're looking in the wrong direction. This is just plain horrific. This is definitely a Rambo that's seen one too many wars and had one too many fights. But to make matters worse, if you look close enough, you will see that this isn't so much an action figure as an in-action figure, because it is all just one mould. There are no points of articulation on this toy whatsoever. So it is, for all intents and purposes, a model. He does come with a bazooka and a bow and arrow, and I think he'll be able to hold them, but that's about it. I don't know what you're supposed to do with this, and I do pity anyone who got suckered into picking it up. Now, there does also seem to be a variation of this figure on the market. It certainly has the same packaging. I don't know whether it's the same company or whether someone's just infringed their copyright to produce another figure that's very similar. This one fares a little bit better. This time they've used a He-Man type body and stuck that head on it. It fares a little bit better in terms of the eyes this time around, and certainly there is articulation. So this is a bit more toyetic. I think this passes muster a little bit better, but nevertheless, it's never going to compare with the real thing. Sometimes bootlegs can just be downright surreal. In their attempts to avoid copyright law, they will mix and match different elements, and they'll just use whatever materials are to hand to be able to assemble something that roughly looks like something else. But out of this, you do get some truly monstrous Frankenstein creations. And I think a good example of this would be the amicable Herculean. I've got to be honest, on the face of it, this is clearly tapping into the popularity of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Obviously, we have some turtle heads, we have some tortoise shells. You'd think that's the market they're tapping into, but they seem to have combined this with He-Man, perhaps, to create a series that's unusual. I'm not entirely sure who the amicable Herculean is. He sounds like a nice enough chap. The title kind of suggests it is one person, but with many different alter egos. Maybe this is a character who just likes his disguises. He does seem to have the same base body with every release, but it does boast that he has interchangeable faces. And that's all well and good up to a point, but why are some of them turtle heads? And why does he have a tortoise shell? I mean, what is that about? I'm left scratching my head wondering just what the hell is going on here. But perhaps it's one of those instances where it's best not to know and not to ask too many questions. At number 7, we definitely have another mashup release. This is obviously two franchises colliding to create something truly surreally strange. Now, right off the bat, I've got to say, this is the only image I've ever seen of this toy. It does often appear on a lot of top 10 lists for being strange and surreal. I'm not sure if it's genuine, just because I've never seen any out of packaging images, so I could be completely wrong on that. I'm not entirely convinced by it, but nevertheless, I do think it is the kind of thing you would see as a bootleg. So part of me does believe that it is genuine. I must say there's part of me that definitely wants to believe that this is genuine. And please, in the comments, do let me know if you know for a fact that this is genuine, because I think it's funny as hell. I do really like it, just because it's so wonderfully surreal. I do love the idea of mixing the Star Wars and E.T. franchises, which of course we know they did as an Easter egg in episode 1, but this takes it one step further. I don't think this is what George Lucas had in mind when he made that possible. This is truly strange. Of all the characters to mix together, this doesn't come out well for either of them, I have to say. And sticking with Star Wars for a moment, or should that be Star Night, we have this wonderful curiosity. Clearly, someone somewhere was able to get hold of the mould for a police officer and motorcycle toy. But I guess they weren't too confident that that was going to fly off the shelves, so they decided to merge it with the Star Wars universe and put Darth Vader on it. Hey, nothing sells quite like Star Wars, right? I guess they just never stopped to ask themselves, what on earth Darth Vader, a Sith Lord in a galaxy far, far away, would want to ride a motorcycle, and a police motorcycle at that? Is this a hobby in his spare time? Does this go some way to answering some of those questions, some of the mysteries we have of what Darth Vader did between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope? Or is this just a really, really badly conceived notion that was just desperate to cash in on the likeness of Darth Vader and the popularity of Star Wars? I can't imagine many kids wanting to see Darth Vader on a police bike. This does not make an exciting or fun toy. And yet, one has to wonder whether someone working in Hasbro saw this and thought it was a fantastic idea, because we would get an official release from Hasbro that has this very same concept in mind. Darth Vader on a motorcycle. It's pretty awful stuff, and make no mistake, if I ever get round to doing a Star Wars video for Weird and Wonderful, this one will be on it. Well, we all know that Spider-Man does whatever a spider can do, and of course, a spider's specialty is... what? What's wrong with this picture? The sniper Spider-Man is definitely a strange concept and a surreal image to look at, it really is. Once again, what we have here is a toy that is ready-made that they can just simply repaint to tie into something that's very, very popular, and maybe, just maybe, they'll kill two birds with one stone, or in this case, one bullet from a sniper rifle. But this is a really good example of them just getting it completely wrong, where mixing these two ideas is just so incongruous, so polar opposite to what the character is meant to be about and represent, and it just doesn't make any logical sense why Spider-Man would A, be in this situation, B, pick up a gun and fight as a soldier. I mean, maybe he took that Civil War a little bit too seriously and too literal in this case, but nevertheless, this is clearly all wrong. And what's really funny is that they keep doing it. You can see these figures being re-released again and again every time there's a new Spider-Man movie, because they put the branding of that film on each one. So it doesn't matter whether it's The Amazing Spider-Man, whether it's from the comic books, or indeed whether it's the Spider-Man Homecoming, you will see reissues of this same concept constantly, which is just very funny. I particularly like this release, which is taking images from all sorts of sources. We've got comic book images, we've got images from computer games. It's all just a mishmash. There's no sort of real artistry to the way it's been put together. We have the Spider-Man logo from the comic books, but it has this wonderful tagline as well, which is, "Come on, enjoy the pleasure together." And strangely, even though the figure is moulded into one position, and of course that gun in his hand is permanently stuck in place, he still comes with an extra weapon. So, yeah, just adds to the mystery. And speaking of unnecessary weapons, next up we have this very strange action hero's Batman. Or at least I think it's Batman. If we look at the emblem on his chest, it's not really a bat symbol, it's more of a cat symbol. So maybe this is Catman. Regardless, it's hard to know where to begin with this toy. There's certainly something very ominous about the packaging. I wouldn't say it's the most kid-friendly packaging. It's a little bit disturbing. We have these two glaring eyes that look pretty evil. Not very friendly eyes at all. It does have the action heroes at a very odd angle. And that's it. That's all we're told. We're not told who this character is. It does tell us to collect them all. I'm not sure if this was a series, if there are other characters in this wave or line. It's anyone's guess. The figure inside the packaging definitely has more than a passing resemblance to the Batman toys that were released in the early 1990s. Clearly, someone was able to get hold of the parts and the mould from one of the Kenner factories. The only thing is that the parts look to be pretty cheap. It's hard to tell at a distance, but I'd put money on these being a very light, flimsy plastic, where the joins of the seam are very, very obvious. The head sculpt looks truly atrocious, and the paint taps don't look to be very, very smooth at all. And then, of course, we have that big, bright cat head symbol on his chest, which just muddies the waters even more. And then to cap it all off, he certainly comes with a lot of accessories. We have something that looks potentially like it's a grappling gun, which is fair enough, but then he's got a crossbow and what looks to be some sort of sword or katana, and then a couple of machine guns. Yeah. This Batman or Catman is certainly prepared, and I don't know about you, but he certainly strikes fear into my heart. And speaking of fear and blood-curdling terror, next we have Alien Man. Here we have another surreal release that is just obviously trying to skirt copyright law, but there's something deeply disturbing about this. The first thing you're going to notice about this figure is the figure itself in that window display. And don't worry, we're going to get onto that, but I want to draw your eye to the image on the right. Because here we have a photograph in negative of someone inside the alien suit. This is pretty damn creepy in its own right. The use of negative only enhances the surrealness of a human head on the big chap alien body. But it's doubly strange because it's literally the opposite of what we see in the figure that we're getting in the packaging. Here we have a human body with an alien head. And then, to create more confusion, there's this very strange tagline: because he dared to dream and never stopped believing. What the hell does that mean? You might notice as well in the top right hand corner, this says it's for ages 4 and up. It's the perfect gift if you never want your kids to sleep at night ever again. And then finally, there's this boast that it glows in the dark. Why? That just makes it even creepier. Now it's radioactive as well. Yeah, I've got to be honest, I don't really know what I'm looking at this figure. It's strange all the way around. You will notice, of course, that the figure, when it's taken out of the box, it only has 3 fingers and 3 toes. So I'm not quite sure this was a man to begin with. I just don't know. I don't know what's going on with this. All I know is it's pretty gross to look at, and it's a damn strange thing. Next up we have the Ninja Hero Rider, and that is Rider singular even though there's 2 in the pack. This time around we've got to give them credit for being quite creative and a little bit more imaginative with their bootleg. I think this is an attempt to cash in on both the boys' toys and the girls' toys markets by merging 2 fairly popular concepts. You've got the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the one hand, and on the other you've got My Little Pony. And what you get when you stick them together? Well, you get fighting Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on horseback. I would say that this still veers towards the boys' market more so than the girls, although we do get some very pretty coloured horses with their real hair manes, which is quite nice. I have to say the most striking thing about this release for me is actually the artwork on the box, because it's quite nicely done for a bootleg, I've got to say. Although I do have to question the expression on the horse's face, because they don't seem to be having such a nice time as the turtles. And the figures themselves outside of the packaging are interesting. The expressions on the face are ambiguous. I can't quite make up my mind whether these turtles have been lobotomized or if they're just in a state of shock. Now, maybe it is the latter. After all, they both do seem to be missing an eye. And who's to say that these guys are friends? They could be worst enemies. Perhaps this is a fight to the death. Now, I've never seen these in action, but the box does promise that these are galloping horses that are battery operated, and I can see there's definitely holes for where the sound effect comes out of the breast of the horse, so I'm guessing these make some pretty interesting sounds. Now, I've never heard it, but I'd be fascinated to know what noises they actually make. It was Shakespeare who posed the question, what's in a name? Well, I think in the case of Lucky Mouse from Winner Toys, the answer has to be irony. Because I don't think there's anything lucky about this mouse. And I don't think there's anything lucky about any of the poor children who received this as a gift. Lucky Mouse has to be my number one, simply because it's the most outrageous, probably the most ironic and most bastardized version of any character I've seen in toy form as a bootleg. I don't think I've ever seen a more egregious example of something flying in the face of the spirit of what the original character was inspired for. Mickey Mouse, as we all well know this toy is clearly based on, is obviously Disney's mascot, and Disney's whole persona, its whole mission is to appeal to children and be safe and friendly and cuddly and warm and nice, and this is a complete inversion of that. This is the most horrific, evil version of Mickey I've ever seen. This is a ferocious, almost rat-like antagonistic character, and it's so bizarre and so surreal that anyone would think to put this on the market, because what kid is going to want this anyway? And then to just dress it up as Mickey Mouse makes it even more absurd. I honestly don't think I've ever seen a more ferocious toy, whether it was intentional or not. This is one really viciously unpleasant thing to look at. But if nothing else, you've got to admire the sheer unmitigated gall of Winner Toys to steal the Disney logo, to steal the Mickey Mouse likeness, and just package this up quite convincingly in terms of its branding and its imaging as an official product. This has to be one of the cheekiest, most ambitious, and most unpleasant bootlegs I've ever seen. So there you go, there's my top 10 bootleg toys. Please do let me know in the comments if there's any toys that I missed or anything that you feel should have been on this top 10 list. The wonderful thing about bootlegs, of course, is that there's so many of them and there's constantly new ones being produced. So I always love to hear about new ones that I've not seen before, because they invariably always raise a smile. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos soon.